All right, well, welcome back everybody to our Security Enablement series here on Cybrary. Today we are joined by Mike Gruen, the VP of Engineering here at Cybrary. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing pretty good. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Along with the series, we are talking about security enablement. Can you kind of give me a brief description of what that means to you as kind of the head of engineering?
Yeah, so security enablement is really about providing the right training and tools to anyone who's touching technology in the organization, making sure they're making good decisions with regard to security. So giving them the knowledge they need to make those decisions.
Okay. And so when the technology team isn't enabled at its core, how does that affect the business as a whole?
Yeah, so what ends up happening is what I've seen is then you end up with a security team that's really solely responsible for security, and there's just a lot of back and forth and inefficiencies. You want an engineering team, for example, that's developing software, is aware of all of the security concerns and is sort of working hand in hand with security. Mm-hmm. Similarly, if you have other people in the organization that are working on other technologies, you want them to know what the implications of some of the choices they're making. If it's a separate team, and not everybody has sort of security as top of mind, then there's going to be back and forth, and it's going to slow things down. It's going to be seen as an impediment to development and progress rather than just a step in the process. So it can go back and forth, really inefficient.
Okay. Yeah, there is kind of a perception that adding security on will kind of slow down production and the process of everything. Has that been your experience? Is that something that you've seen in your time?
Yeah, I've definitely seen that as the perception. What I've experienced is just the opposite. What ends up happening back in those other environments, sort of where there is that separate security team, things slow down because there's a lot of back and forth. The engineering team builds a thing, they have to get sign off from the security group or go through some sort of security review process. Mm-hmm. Then it has to come back to them. Then it might go to the operations team, and the operations team has to go through a security audit of how they want it deployed, stuff like that. Engineers might make bad decisions, and then you have to sort of unwind those. And so that's how it sort of used to work. When everybody's enabled to make those decisions, they have all the information and they're working sort of cohesively. Mm-hmm. It's just part of the process. And so while it seems like it might be a little slower in the beginning because you have to do a little bit more thinking and a little bit more planning, in the long run, it's just faster because you can get everything out. Everybody's involved in every decision. Security is just baked into it. And so you're not going back and having to find the problems and having to figure out, oh, well, we implemented it this way and that's really horrible. Now we have to unwind it and fix it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like if, I'm building something myself, if I'm then able to make sure that it's secure on my own without having to send it out to somebody else and then wait for them to get back to it, especially, you're kind of taking a whole nother team's time to work through and kind of work on your project or what you're doing.
Right. And so the other thing really in that whole process is we don't expect everyone to know everything about security. What we expect is that everybody sort of has it top of mind, but they know who to work with and it's sort of embedded into the organization, embedded into the team. The downside to what you just described with you do a thing and then it goes off to somebody else is there's all that context switching. You have to bring them up to speed. What is it that I'm trying to get done? Why is it? How's it supposed to work? Who's supposed to have access to it? So it's just a lot slower because you have to educate someone every time you're doing it.
Yeah, I could see it taking a long time, especially in like a giant organization that, there's hundreds of engineers or something. You got to wait for a security team that might not even work in the same building or in a different time zone or something like that. That can definitely start. The time is just going to start building up on how long everything is taking. So before, in your blog post that we're going to link this to, and speaking with Kenny in one of our earlier episodes, DevSecOps came up. Could you give kind of a brief explanation what that is for people who might not be familiar with it? It is kind of a newer term in the cybersecurity field.
Yeah, sure. So DevOps has been around for a while. DevSecOps, probably within the last 5-6 years, has sort of picked up. And really the idea with DevOps, DevSecOps, it's a mentality, it's a mindset. It's not like a job. It's not, we have a DevSecOps team. It's just a mindset of how to do things. DevOps is infrastructure as code. It's taking software engineering practices and applying it to these virtual environments and how you build them and maintain them and manage them and monitor them. DevSecOps is just adding security into it. One of the things that's interesting is that the same things that you're doing for monitoring from an operations perspective, those same alerts, those same problems, those same things may also have security implications. So the same types of things that you want to be concerned with from an operations perspective are the same things that security people might want to see. Like, oh, there's been a spike in CPU usage. That might indicate that a machine has been compromised. It might just implicate, we have heavier load than normal and we need to spin up more instances. So getting security more involved into the whole thing. And then also because it is infrastructure as code, writing it securely, deploying it securely, making sure that whole pipeline is secure, calling it out as one of the things that you really need to bake into that development and operations process.
Yeah. I mean, over the past like couple years, like since DevSecOps has become a thing, have you noticed like how much that is like started to be ingrained in like what people are trying to do and how people are building things?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the circles that I run in, it's a thing. So obviously I'm biased because the people that I work with, they're the ones who sort of inform me. You know, or a number of years ago when I was at AWS reInvent and the sort of concepts were first being surfaced to me. It was the same people. But I, you know, in looking around the industry, definitely DevOps is like is a buzzword, and I think DevSecOps is really coming along right behind it, and it is the future. It's where things are going. I think more and more people are becoming familiar with it.
Yeah.
And that is definitely the direction that things are going. You need to flatten your organization, and DevOps is really a way of doing that. Yeah. It's bringing the different groups together and having them work together cohesively. Yeah.
Kind of starting to like streamline some things.
Yep.
So like, how does DevSecOps relate here at Cybrary? Like, how is that something that we use and implement?
Yeah, I mean, that's the engineering team, as you know.
Yeah.
We have our UI developers, our back-end developers, and then we have one of our developers, who's one of the back-end developers, also is responsible for deployment and some of the infrastructure. And then we have another infrastructure engineer who's, you know, working on the Kubernetes and configurations and things along those lines. And they're all working together. They all are part of the same engineering team. Everything goes through the same build process, code reviews, the rest of it. So it's just ingrained into how the engineering team operates.
Okay. So as before, like I said, speaking with Kenny, he was talking about data scientists and data engineers kind of bringing in security enablement. Like, how is that something that you also see like correlates with this?
Yeah. So the first thing that I sort of believe pretty strongly is that data engineering, data science really belongs to the engineering team in a lot of ways. The technology team, they have access to all the data. They are building systems that move data around or analyze it. So it all needs to sort of work in that same environment. The stuff that they're doing should go through code reviews. It should be treated just like software. So having data science embedded into just the regular software engineering best practices is a good way to go. And so, yeah, so the way I see data science working within DevSecOps is, you know, both how data science works for the business and how we all understand, you know, we can use the data to inform where the business can go. There's also data science that can be applied to the security and the operations of those things. So taking the data that's being generated, the monitoring and alerting, and applying, you know, data science, machine learning, those types of things to that can also help to, you know, surface anomalies and other things. So and create alerts. So I think data science getting more involved in security, it's already happening, and I think that's sort of the future of where some of that's being applied.
Some of that's going.
Yeah.
I mean, we're a pretty small company. There's 12, 13 people on the engineering team. Like, how is security enablement some different here than, let's say, like a larger organization that might have, you know, 100 engineers or something like that?
Yeah, it's going to be, I mean, I think what we are is what we would be at a larger organization is we'd be one team amongst many. And so the idea is rather than having these silos of teams where all of the security people are together and all of the infrastructure, you know, all of the operations people are together and all the software engineers, you know, are together, right? Really breaking those down and making multifunctional or cross-functional teams where maybe, you know, you don't necessarily need an infrastructure person that's dedicated to that team. They might have 10% of their time is being used with one team. And so they might spread their time. Same thing with data science. They might spend a little bit of time on multiple teams, but they are on that team. They're involved in the decisions. They know what's going on. They're informed, they're kept in the loop and stuff like that. So I think at a larger organization, it's just a matter of creating more cross-functional teams or multifunctional teams rather than grouping them by domain or discipline.
Yeah, what they do. It's
Right.
Yeah, you have a little bit of everybody on each team, and then everyone's kind of aware of everything that's going on, kind of helping make those decisions.
Right. And then what you need to do, again, a big difference between a small company like ours, where there's, 2 or 3 people that are really involved in the infrastructure who sit next to each other and can talk to each other and make sure they're following best practices. At larger organizations, you definitely need to have another layer of sort of those groups that are in those people that are sort of grouped together, whether they're data science or security, or operations. They still need to meet. They still need to talk. They still need to inform each other about what's going on and make sure that they're all moving in lockstep.
Yeah.
But they're not a separate team. They're and I think that also helps to bring great ideas to the forefront, right? A team might do something a little differently, and then can inform, that person, that operations person or engineer or whomever is on that team can then sort of bring that best practice to other teams, and it can sort of allow things to flourish and innovation to occur and move faster.
Yeah. Well, Mike, is there anything else relating to security enablement that you'd like to touch on while we have you here?
Yeah. Some of the things that we talked about really apply sort of to, I have this software engineering mindset because that's my background or infrastructure and product, but sort of the way I think things are going in the future, technology is being brought into more parts of the business. More people are going to be making decisions in near real time. And so there's going to be parts of the business that you don't think of today that are really going to be impacting security because they have access to these technologies and they're going to be wanting to work on things. So as that happens, more and more people within an organization are going to have these ideas sort of built in. It's not going to be enough to just do security awareness training. Yeah. It's not just that they're getting emails and they need to know not to click on a link. It's going to go way beyond that because they're going to have they're going to be responsible for some of these technologies that they're managing, and those are the things that are going to cause the problems, whether it's security or information privacy or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's something we touched on. I think when I was speaking with Leaf, it's like now it's, security used to be something that maybe you did on your onboarding the first day for a couple hours and then you kind of forgot about. But yeah, now it seems like it's going to be something that is a continuously training that everyone's going to kind of have to go into, depending on kind of what your role is and what you have access to. Is that kind of how you see?
Yeah, I definitely see it that way. And I think the way it's going to work is really, it's all going to be role based. It's going to be, training that or information that's presented based on what you do. Obviously, a software engineer needs to know secure coding best practices. An infrastructure person doesn't need to know that. A marketing person doesn't need to know the same stuff, but eventually a marketing person will need to understand the implications of some of the things that they're trying to do and how that impacts security. And I think that's coming a lot faster than people think.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you for stopping by. I appreciate your time and everything.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Pleasure.
Thanks, guys.